There's something unsettling about old family portraits, how they watch you, even in the dead of night. The painting that hung in the hall of the Harrow family estate was no exception. It arrived by courier on a rainy Thursday morning, nestled in layers of worn, yellowed fabric. Marion Harrow, the current caretaker of the house after her parents passed, accepted the delivery with a puzzled frown. She'd been sorting through endless paperwork when the doorbell rang. Legal forms, estate documents, bills she couldn't remember accumulating. She didn't recall ordering a painting. The courier, a middle-aged man with a cap pulled low over his brow, handed her the crate with a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. Property of the Harrow family. Return to rightful place. There was no return address. Marion dragged the crate into the living room and pried it open, the smell of old varnish and mildew filling the air. Inside lay a painting, its frame elaborate but tarnished with age. At first glance, she thought, it might be a portrait of one of her great-grandmothers, a stern-looking matron perhaps, given how families like to immortalize their kin. But as she pulled away the protective cloth, her breath hitched. It was a woman she didn't recognize, a woman who shouldn't belong to her family. She sat in a high-backed chair, dressed in an outdated gown that might have been fashionable in the late 1800s. Her hair was dark, streaked with grey, and her expression was ambiguous. The eyes seemed too knowing, too alive. Marion felt an inexplicable shiver. She carried the painting to the hallway and hung it in the only empty spot on the wall, just above the old cherrywood table. From there, the woman's gaze followed anyone who walked past, eyes that almost seemed to move with them. Later that night, after Marion made herself a cup of tea and tried to relax in front of the television, she found herself glancing back at the hallway. The painting was just visible through the doorway, a pale face half in shadow. A storm had rolled in off the coast. Lightning flickered against the window, casting odd shadows that made the painting seem to shift. "Don't be ridiculous," she muttered to herself. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. When she finally went to bed, the house creaked in the wind. The old wood moaned and shifted, but every sound seemed amplified. At some point, she thought, she heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, as though someone were pacing. She pulled the covers up to her chin, her heart pounding. Then silence. She drifted off eventually, but her dreams were troubled. She was standing in front of the painting, the woman's eyes boring into her, the lips moving ever so slightly, whispering something she couldn't quite make out. When she awoke, the storm had passed, but the air felt heavy, as though something had settled over the house during the night. Marion dressed quickly and went to the hallway. She felt an almost magnetic pull to the painting. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw it. The woman in the portrait looked older. It wasn't possible, of course. Paintings don't age, at least not overnight. But there was no mistaking. The new lines that creased her face, the deepening shadows under her eyes. Marion felt a wave of nausea. She glanced around the house, but nothing else seemed out of place. The rest of the family photos, the furniture, everything was as it should be. Only the woman in the picture frame had changed. Marion couldn't shake the image of the painting's sudden change. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd been mistaken the first time she looked. Maybe the lighting in the hallway was playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. After breakfast, she found herself drawn back to the painting. The woman's eyes seemed to follow her every move, no matter where she stood. Her gaze was no longer just watchful. It was almost accusing, Marion felt like an intruder in her own home. Determined to find some explanation, she went up to the attic. The old wooden staircase creaked with every step, dust motes dancing in the narrow beam of sunlight. She remembered her parents telling her that most of the family's history was stored up here, boxes of letters, forgotten heirlooms, and yellowed newspapers. She rummaged through an old trunk marked Harrow Family Archives. Inside, she found bundles of brittle letters tied with faded ribbons. Some were addressed to her great-grandfather, others to her grandmother. But nowhere did she find any mention of the woman in the painting. One small envelope, however, caught her eye. It was sealed in dark red wax, bearing an unfamiliar crest. Marion carefully opened it. Inside was a single piece of parchment, handwritten in an elegant, looping script. Do not trust her. She grows stronger with each passing year. The painting must remain in the family's care, but never let her name be spoken. There was no signature. Marion's pulse quickened. A chill ran down her spine. She hurried back downstairs, clutching the note like a lifeline. But the moment she reached the hallway, the painting seemed different again. The woman's hair now had streaks of pure white, her eyes sunken deeper into her skull. Her lips curved slightly in a faint, mocking smile. Marion's hands trembled. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind battering the windows, her mind replaying the warning in the letter. What did it mean she grows stronger? Was the painting alive somehow? At 3:13 a.m. she heard it again, the slow, deliberate footsteps outside her room. She sat bolt upright, her heart hammering. The footsteps paused just beyond the door. "Who's there?" she whispered, but the only answer was silence. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand, but the bulb flickered and died. Darkness pressed in on her. She felt trapped, like the house itself was closing in. A soft voice broke the silence, whispering her name. "Marion," she froze. The voice sounded old, brittle, like dead leaves, yet unmistakably feminine. "Who are you?" she demanded. But the voice only laughed, a sound like dry paper crumpling. Slowly, she rose from her bed and crept to the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the knob. She opened it, half expecting to find someone standing there. But the hallway was empty, except for the painting. The woman in the portrait was now impossibly old, skin sallow, lips cracked, eyes clouded yet piercing. Her hand was outstretched, as though beckoning Marion closer. Marion gasped, stumbling backward. In that moment, the house seemed to exhale, a long, rattling sigh that set every floorboard and beam shuddering. And then the whisper came again, louder. This time, as though it came from the walls themselves. "Marion, let me in." Marion slammed her bedroom door shut and locked it, her breath ragged, her pulse thundering in her ears. The voice, the dry, brittle voice, still echoed in her mind. "Marion, let me in." She pressed her back to the door and squeezed her, eyes shut. It had to be a dream. Paintings didn't age, paintings didn't speak. Yet the woman in the portrait had grown older, and now she was beckoning. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled over the house. Marion gathered her courage and went downstairs. The hallway felt like a different place now, colder, somehow darker. Even in daylight, the painting was still there, but the woman's face seemed to have changed yet again. Her eyes were now milky white, clouded by age, yet they seemed to see everything. Her mouth hung half open, as if she were about to speak. Marion felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She glanced at the old note she'd found. Do not trust her. She grows stronger with each passing year. The painting must remain in the family's care, but never let her name be spoken.
Her name. Marion's heart skipped a beat. The note had warned her never to speak the woman's name. But what was her name? Nobody in the family had ever mentioned it. No one had written it down. It was as if the woman's identity had been
deliberately erased. The thought occurred to her that maybe the painting itself was feeding on that secrecy, on that fear. Maybe the silence had given it power. She needed answers. She rummaged through the library, searching through every family record she could find. Old diaries, birth certificates, marriage licenses. Names upon names, but never hers. Frustration and dread coiled in her gut. Every time she thought she'd found a clue, it led nowhere. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the house filled with shadows again. Marion lit every lamp she could find, determined not to let the darkness win. But the painting loomed in the hallway, watching. She considered taking it down, burning it, anything to break the hold it seemed to have over the house. But something deep inside told her that would only make it worse. That night, sleep was impossible. She sat in the living room with a cup of tea, staring at the painting. The woman's hand was now fully outstretched, fingers long and bony. Her mouth seemed to move, though no sound came. Marion's vision blurred with exhaustion. She blinked when her eyes cleared. She saw words scrawled across the bottom of the painting's frame in a dark, dripping script that hadn't been there before. Say my name. Marion's breath caught. The letters seemed to pulse, as if alive. She backed away, heart hammering. No, she whispered. No, I won't. The painting's mouth twisted into a terrible grin. From the hallway, a dry, papery voice answered. Say it, Marion. He
shook her head violently. No, I won't. A sudden gust of wind burst through the house, slamming doors, rattling windows. The air turned ice cold. The woman's eyes glowed with a sickly white light, and her voice rose to a shriek. Say it! Marion screamed, covering her ears. Then, silence. She opened her eyes.
The painting was still there. The woman's expression had shifted yet again. Her smile gone, replaced by a hollow, empty stare. But in that emptiness, Marion felt a dangerous invitation. The woman wanted something, and Marion feared that if she learned the name, she might never be able to forget it or escape its power. Marion couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything else but the woman's demand. Say my name. She spent the next morning pacing the house, her mind buzzing with dread. Every time she passed the hallway, she felt the painting's eyes burning into her. The woman's face had changed yet again, now more skeletal, her hair a thin white halo around sunken cheeks. Her hand was still outstretched, as if beckoning Marion into some dark fate. Desperate for answers, Marion reached out to her cousin Eleanor, the only other living relative she could trust. Eleanor lived 2 states over, but had always been fascinated by the Harrow family's odd history. Marion, you sound awful, Eleanor said over the phone. Are you okay? It's that painting, Marion whispered. It's changing.
I swear it's alive. And there's something about her name. Eleanor went silent for a moment.
Marion, I don't know how to say this, but Grandma once told me something strange about that painting. She said it was a family heirloom, yes, but also a prison. She told me that as long as we never spoke the woman's name aloud, she would remain trapped in the frame. Marian's breath caught. "But who is she?" "I don't know," Eleanor admitted. Grandma was always too scared to talk about it. She said the painting came from Europe. Some great aunt or something
brought it over.
But every generation she ages, and the oldest child in the family inherits the responsibility of watching it. Marian's heart sank. "So it's my turn." "Yes," Eleanor said, voice trembling. "Marian, whatever you do, don't say her name. That's the key." Grandma said if we spoke her name aloud, we'd break the seal. A cold dread filled Marian's chest. "Eleanor, what happens if the seal breaks?" Eleanor was silent. Then she whispered, "She'll be free. The
line went dead. Marian stared at the phone, her pulse racing.
She could hear a soft tapping in the hallway, like fingernails on glass. She crept toward the painting. The woman's smile had returned, twisted and triumphant. Her lips moved slowly, forming silent words that Marian couldn't hear, but she knew what they meant. "Say my name." Lightning flickered through the window, illuminating the hallway in harsh flashes. Marian tried to back away, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. The woman's eyes glowed with a cold, malevolent light. A sudden gust of wind burst through the house, rattling the old window panes. The woman's voice filled the air, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Marian, you've always been the curious one." Marian's heart slammed in her chest. "What do you want from me?" she cried. The woman's voice, now stronger, rang out from the frame. "Freedom." The letters beneath the painting shifted and shimmered, revealing something that had been hidden all along. A single name written in faded ink. Marian's eyes widened. She could see it, Leora. She clapped her hands over her mouth, but the name was already in her head, repeating itself like a drumbeat. Leora. 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 The woman's smile widened. The glass in the frame rattled, and the shadows in the hallway deepened. The air grew thick, as though the house itself was holding its breath. "Say it!" the woman commanded. Marian felt her lips parting, as if beyond her control. The name clawed at her throat, desperate to be spoken. She fought it, every muscle trembling with resistance, but a cold, invisible force pressed down on her, crushing her will. Her mouth opened. She choked back, the last syllable gasping. The woman shrieked, a sound like glass shattering. The hallway filled with darkness. The lights sputtered and died. Marian fell to her knees, the air around her charged with an unnatural cold. A shape began to emerge from the painting, first a hand, then an arm, thin and trembling, but solid. Marian's scream died in her throat. The woman was trying to pull herself out. Marian knew then. She had to find a way to stop her, before the name was spoken, before the curse was unleashed completely. Marian fell backward, eyes wide in horror, as the woman's hand stretched further out of the painting, flesh and bone, where once there had only been paint and canvas. The air crackled with a cold, electric charge, making every hair on her arms.
"Stand on end, Marian!" the woman crooned, her voice a soft rasp, like dead leaves. "It's time!" "No!" Marian screamed. She scrambled back, bumping into the hallway table.
A family Bible tumbled to the floor, its pages fluttering like dying birds. The woman's other hand emerged, grasping the frame's edge with yellowed, claw-like fingers. Her face twisted into a grin that no longer belonged to any painting. Her skin hung loose and grey, her eyes sunken midst of darkness. Say my name, she hissed. Marian's mind raced. Eleanor's words came back in a rush. If we speak her name aloud, we break the seal. She had nearly spoken it already. Leora! The woman lunged, only her torso still anchored in the painting. Her arms reached for Marian, fingers stretching impossibly.
Long! Marian clamped her hands over her mouth, fighting to hold back the name that burned in her throat.
Tears streamed down her face. No, I won't let you out, she sobbed. The woman's eyes glowed with fury. You cannot resist me forever, she spat. Every generation has tried and every generation has failed, but Marian wasn't.
Ready to give up. Through the blur of tears, she saw the family Bible on the floor, its cracked spine gaping open. An idea sparked in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, faith, or something like it, could hold the curse at bay. She lunged for the book,
flipping through its pages with trembling fingers. She didn't know what she was looking for. An exorcism, a prayer, anything. The woman's voice rose into a shriek, the walls trembling as if the house itself were rebelling against Marian's defiance. Say it! No! Marian cried. She found a passage that felt right. Psalm 91, a prayer of protection. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. She read aloud, her voice trembling, but gaining strength with every word. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. The woman let out a howl that rattled the windows. Her hands, now halfway through the frame, began to wither, the flesh shriveling to bone and dust. Marian's
voice grew stronger. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. The woman's mouth twisted into a terrible rictus of rage and pain. Her arms withdrew, the bones blackening and crumbling to ash.
Her face cracked like old plaster, splitting down the middle. Marian's heart thundered as she spoke the final lines. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him, I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. A final scream erupted from the painting, a sound that seemed to come from every corner of the house at once. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was gone. Marian collapsed to the floor, the Bible slipping from her grasp. The hallway was silent, save for the slow creak of the old house settling. She looked up at the painting. The woman's face had reverted to its original form, young, serene, but her eyes were closed now, her hands folded in her lap. The frame was sealed, the glass unbroken. Marian wept, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of victory. She knew the curse wasn't gone forever. The painting would still age with each generation, but for now she had held the line. She rose to her feet, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't known since arriving. She turned to leave, but not before whispering a promise to herself. I will never say her name, and I will make sure no one else ever does. The house was quiet as she walked away, but she could still feel the painting's eyes on her back, forever waiting, forever watching.